guys, welcome to the Therapist Thrival Guide. My name is Miranda Barker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and this is my co-host, Dr. Lucas Vellini, LMFT.
Hello. And today we're coming to you live from Ellie's annual national conference. This year's theme is Elevate, and so this is when our franchise owners from all across the country come in with their clinic directors, and we just spend a few days joining, connecting, learning, and making sure that everything we're trying to do here stays on track. And so we thought it would be fitting to throw in a live recording of Thrival. And so you want to get us rolling on the topic, Barker?
Yes. So today we wanted to talk more about clinical leadership. And guys, I'm so nervous. Like I never do this in front of people. And so I'm so excited to do this. But yeah, my voice might crack a little bit. But
there's 1,500 people here.
Yes.
Which, I love it. I'm all about this stuff.
Yeah.
And so clinical leadership, I think it's something relevant because especially when you're a young clinician, emerging clinician, you get involved in, you get your first job in a clinic and you don't really have any idea what to expect. And so if you have poor leadership, you can tend to generalize that to being what leadership looks like across the industry. If you have exceptional leadership, you can also generalize that, both of which are problematic because it varies. And when it comes to clinical leadership, I think one of the, issues that clinics can run into is getting a master's degree in counseling, marriage and family therapy, social work. We don't take courses on running a business. We don't take courses on how to lead a team of clinicians. Supervision isn't even acknowledged in a graduate program because you're many years away from that being relevant to your qualifications. And, one of the things we're trying to do here at Ellie is be very intentional about the culture and climate that we generate at each of the clinics. And so, I think part of this will be for folks interested in their own leadership role and things they could be doing differently at their clinic. The other takeaway, I think, would be for clinicians who are at a clinic to be able to have more of a reference point of, is this problematic leadership that I should get away from because there is better out there? Because again, when you're brand new, you don't even have a reference for any of this stuff. And so when we talk about leadership, I don't know, maybe each of our guests can go around, introduce themselves and what your role is with Ellie.
Jacob, do you want to start?
So I'm Jacob Henry. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Tennessee. I'm one of our executive directors for a group of clinics in Tennessee. What was the other part I'm supposed to say?
Well, I think that was it.
Okay.
And
yeah, you killed it.
The chain of clinics you're in was one of the first franchise owners to open and then to expand into multiple locations.
They like to say they were the first, but it's debatable. Emily, do you want to go next?
Sure. I am Emily Kohler-Hanson. I am a clinical operations director in Minnesota for 3 Ellie locations in the metro area. And previously in the Moorhead location, opened that a couple of years ago, was there for a while and jumped on over to the city. So that's pretty exciting. My background is in LMFT and I'm LMFT approved supervisor as well.
So I'm Fabeain Barkwell. I'm a clinic director at Ellie Mental Health, Pflugerville, which is a clinic about 15 minutes north of the Austin area. Currently, we were the 29th clinic to be open in Texas. So I guess you could say I'm one of the OGs. We've been open a year. And
we say that.
Yeah, you say that. And yeah.
I feel like I should know when we open and what number we are. I'm Dynisha Smith. I'm based in Boise, Idaho. We've also been open here, but I have no clue what number we were. So.
You were the first one to open in Idaho.
That's facts. Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so excited to have you guys here and to be talking about clinical leadership because each one of your clinical territory directors or different people in your lives nominated you because they were these people are stellar clinicians and stellar leaders. And so I want to kind of just jump into this conversation by asking you about people in your life that you would consider amazing leaders and past, present, and kind of what characteristics stand out to you as being a caring leader.
So I'll start. One of my first jobs out of grad school was in an inpatient acute setting. So those are the acute of the acute: crisis, actively psychotic, suicidal. So if you've ever worked in a hospital setting, you know how intense that can be. And the director of clinical services at the time, her name is Brittany Sperry, and she currently works for a medical system called Summit right now. And I just remember how intuitive she was, how, she wasn't above anything. She was willing to hit the floor. And she was kind of like my first ideal image into the type of leader that I wanted to be, and how I try to facilitate that with my team. So, yeah.
And it sounds like, and I think this is an important part of leadership, like she was just good at her job.
She was. She was a
she was-
clinician first and a leader. Well, I mean, by proxy, she was a leader, of course, but, she was like, I'm a therapist.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I couldn't do.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're working in a high-intensity setting, and you would show up there each day, watch her maintain a state of composure, a sense of knowing, and I'm totally guessing based upon your what you've said about her so far, but I would also imagine there's a degree of openness and accessibility to her.
Yes, and vulnerability to that point too. Like, this is overwhelming, but it's gonna get done. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that I've tried to keep in mind too, because if everybody's panicking or running around like a chicken with their head cut off, nothing gets done. So somebody has to be able to keep the calm during the storm, because storms are gonna come and go, but you always get through it if you do it together.
That was a great example. Other examples?
Yeah. One of my early leaders, and I thought it was interesting that you said yours was one of your early leaders as well, because I think when you're a fresh graduate and you're starting out and you're working on that license, the leader that you have during that time is so incredibly important and really sets you up for what your whole career is going to look like. And I was really fortunate to have someone who was doing my licensure supervision. He was not my boss at the time, somebody else was, but I had some of my best supervision sessions being able to go into that office and talk with him about anything, whether it was clinical work, what was going on for me. I still keep in touch with him. He's now retired. But I've told this story before in other presentations I've given, but my best supervision session I ever had was also my worst one, where the day before my supervision session that morning, I learned my dad had a terminal illness. And I got up that morning and was like, okay, here's my plan. I'm going to go into work. It's going to be fine. I gave myself a pep talk in the car. And I walked into his office, and Greg looks at me and he goes, how you doing? And I lost it. But it was such a great moment, because to have a supervisor sit on the other side of that table with you and say, you know what, we work with families and this is our opportunity to lead by example. And right now you are being called to take care of yours. And to have a supervisor say that to you and like give you the permission, which is weird that we know better as therapists, but we don't always feel like we have the permission to do that, was amazing. And I think having those experiences early on where you could be vulnerable with someone and have the exact reaction that you needed builds the relationship where you go, okay, I can talk to this person, even if it's like my mistake or I messed up. This is a person I could go to who's going to help me figure it out. And when it came time for me to ask career questions or bigger decisions or, what my next steps were professionally, he's someone that I've reached out to every time and been able to have really great conversations with. And I think everybody needs a supervisor like that in their life at some point.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind the most for me, I think his name's Adam Graham, and he did three things I felt like really well. He showed that he cared, he collaborated with us, and then he was also a champion for us.
You like the C's.
Yeah, if we can make it all start with the same letter,
like
we're going to
it.
do it. So, but like you knew he cared not just about the work, but he cared about you personally, and made coming to work even much more easier, because I worked in an inpatient unit too, and it's it's just tough, and so going someplace where people care about you and your career is important. And he collaborated with any and everybody. We were a multidisciplinary team, so he took that from the techs all the way up to the providers, and everybody's voice mattered. And then decisions were made based on the best ideas, kind of deal. But then also he would be a champion where he would put you in situations for you to succeed, not for him to succeed. And to me, that was really important, one, to help me develop, but to also understand that like he doesn't have to do it all. Like that to me was what I took away, is he recognizes it's more about the team than about him getting the notoriety kind of deal.
I was thinking about this because I actually haven't had a supervisor, like a boss in the clinical setting, outside of a school. The school was the first place I worked, but I feel like that's different than a clinical setting, whether it's inpatient or outpatient. But I do think in the nonprofit sector, I've been fortunate to have leaders who make things safe. Like I was trying to think of how to say this, but it's safe to show up and it's safe to fail and it's safe to root for yourself, which I think matters. I had leaders that didn't try to humble me or anybody else. And I think I also learned a lot about how to collaborate and communicate in a way that's clear and direct, but also tactful from all of the leaders that I had kind of in the nonprofit sector. And that has really impacted how I develop others and how I lead.
So one of the reasons why I chose the topic around leadership is because one of our keynote speakers for this conference wrote a book called The Art of Caring Leadership. And she has different kind of tenets or things that she shares throughout this book. And so one of the things that she talks a lot about is creating a culture of listening. And several of you kind of alluded to that when you were talking about leaders in your life that were open, transparent, people that you could go to and talk to. And even just times that you felt heard as a clinician. And so I'm curious how each of you are creating that culture of listening in your own clinics now.
I'm gonna throw out there, we co-work a lot. I don't know if anybody else does that, but I feel like we have created this space in which we'll all be kind of sitting there. And I will say we're not fully staffed by any means, so it's not like 15 people in one room co-working, but we're like treatment planning together. And so, hey, how should I say this? Hey, this is what they're experiencing. Or we're all sitting there wrapping up notes together, kind of in the staff lounge or whatever. And then things just come up. They'll have ideas, they'll have suggestions. How can we reach this community? How can we reach this community? And they know that, like, because we've all kind of sat and got comfortable together in the work, that all of the ideas that they throw out do become something. And I also like being on the same level with everybody. So we all sitting on the couch, like what we're doing, or we're all sitting on the floor. And like, I don't know if there's a term for it, but kind of like collaborative leadership, and not me here and y'all here and thanks for your ideas, but I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. But really me here and please help me.
Well, and they know that you're listening.
Yeah.
That's great.
We don't have as many opportunities to co-facilitate or co-work like Dynisha was saying, but I try to take as many opportunities with my team as I can to just check in with them. Our monthly team meeting is a big piece as well. So outside of like normal emails and stuff that I might get all the time, I try to make sure that when I'm having a conversation with anybody, that they're getting my undivided attention and that I'm responsive. Because I think that's a big thing. It's like, it's one thing for me to come to you and tell you something and it falls on deaf ears and I don't see any kind of solutions. But even if there isn't a solution at that time, I'm actively working on it. I'm communicating you, giving you updates when I can. So, you know, I do care about what it is you have to say, even if the outcome isn't going to be the one you want.
How often are you meeting with your staff? Like, are you meeting weekly as a group? And then do you have like one-on-ones throughout the week or bi-weekly?
So how I've kind of set up the clinic, because I also have supervisors for each discipline. So I have a social work supervisor and an LPC supervisor as well. So we have our team meetings monthly. I meet individually with everyone, it seems like almost every day, but officially monthly. And then they have supervision with their supervisors weekly. So it's kind of like a chain. If ever there was a time you couldn't get to me, I've kind of facilitated it where you can go to your supervisor as well. So it's kind of like a full circle approach, if you will. Even though I'm low-key kind of panicking now because I'm not there, but I know they're okay.
And who do you go to? Who's your leader?
So my Z and I, we spend a lot of time together. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that has led to the success in our clinic. Because outside of working together, we might go to the gym together or whatever the case may be. So because there's a partnership that's there and an investment not only into me as the leader, but as a person. You know, how am I taking care of myself? And outside of that, you know, I occasionally, even though I've completed supervision a long time ago, I still call my supervisor from every time. You know, you never stop learning or feedback. And sometimes I'm like, she's probably gonna say, now you should know this, but she never does. She listens to my questions and we just keep it pushing.
What about you, Emily?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question, and to me, it makes a difference if you are building a team and hiring new folks in, or if you're inheriting a team, because I do different things with each one. When I'm building a team, I always start in the interviews. I ask every person I interview as part of their interview what they most need from a supervisor and what they most want out of their career. Because I think when we hire therapists, it amazes me how many people are looking for stuff beyond therapy. You know, they're interested in teaching or writing or presenting or being a supervisor, you know, or other ways of mentoring. And so being able to plant those ideas as part of that interview of, oh, here's the opportunity we have, or we offer supervision training 3 times a year, or the thing that, you know, they connect with. It's nice for them to be heard right away of knowing, okay, this person will champion me and will give me other opportunities. And as far as inheriting a team, with each of the teams recently that I inherited, I met with them, everybody individually, and asked them all, what is it that you like about your team and what needs to change? Because if there's something that they liked and was working, I wasn't going to change it. And the things that they said needed to change, I got them done within 24 hours. Like, I think being that immediate response and having people see an impact right away on the changes that I could make. And it amazed me, some of the stuff people brought up. They're like, can we get a clock in the waiting room? Yes, I'll have it done today. You know, like it's some of those little things, but then having someone walk in later and be like, you put a clock in the waiting room. And I was like, yes, ma'am, I did. You know, you said you needed it. I followed through.
Yeah.
On a daily basis, I try not to end my day until I've responded to every one of my team's messages and email messages. Like I do not leave a staff person hanging on a daily basis. So I try and answer those every day. I might leave somebody else's email sitting overnight, but for my team, I will answer you the same day.
So you prioritize emails from people that
Absolutely.
Yeah, that you lead.
I'll email you back tomorrow, Lucas, but
and I'll email you back maybe next Thursday to never.
That's okay. But I think it's nice to know though for those folks like that they have someone who will be responsive to them, and especially when you inherit a team, it's hard for people to have a change in leadership. I mean, there's times that I've changed jobs because my leader was moving somewhere else, like someone I've really clicked with in the past. Like, I think people can be more connected to their leader sometimes than they are to the business itself, because that's who their relationship is with. It's not always the company, you know, and as much as we want it to be, like we try and strive for that company culture, but that's something that's enacted in that constant relationship with their leader. So if it's not there, they really feel so disconnected. And I think our jobs are too hard to be disconnected. Like the work you need that level of support.
I think humility goes a long way for me. I really want to think I have the best ideas in the room, and that's not always the case. And I also sometimes throw out ideas and they fail epically. And so being able to take that feedback and move forward, and even empathize with the team's situation and kind of what they're saying they need. But to me, a big aspect of making sure that I'm listening is also acting on what I'm hearing. I think as therapists, we know all the active listening skills and everything, but I think they know I listen if I act on it. Like if it shows up in the break room, the clock, right? And it doesn't matter how small it is. Like each one of those adds up to where that carries a lot of weight with the team.
I love it. Okay, so this is maybe a more fun question because, so in the book, Heather Younger also talks about recognition and wanting to recognize and reward your employees. And I think one of the things that came up in a conversation I was having with a clinician today was just how they don't have to be big, huge, giant, like we're all going to Vegas or something. I don't know. But like they can be small acts of recognition or to show that you're listening. And so I'm curious, at each of your clinics, how are you recognizing and rewarding clinicians?
I mean, we just started something where we're giving out trophies every month to like recognize specific benchmarks.
Like real trophies?
Real traveling trophies. So the therapist gets it for like a month, and they hold that title, but they got to defend the title the next month. And so
Some healthy competition.
Okay,
Right?
so what are the
Like
what
it.
are they? Like,
all right, so you've got the Beast Mode trophy, which is like the Incredible Hulk hulking out, and it's for the person who sees the most clients in the month. We've got the Kicking Ass Award, which is the person who has the most new clients in a month, and then the Top Banana Award, which is the individual who makes Ellie the most appealing, pun intended, to the community through
I didn't even get that. That's great.
through doing the most outreach in the community, right? And so it obviously humor, right, is one of our core values, and we've integrated that into it. But there's an element of competition, but it's also just recognizing that they've done a lot of effort to do that. And then our hope is it becomes this collaboration where, okay, they're doing something right. Go learn from your coworker. You don't have to come and learn from the leadership team. The knowledge is collective, and let's share that together. So it's been a really fun thing, kind of deal that we've rolled out here recently.
I like that because those are all really important markers too of a clinic's vitality and sustainability. Or is folks working toward hitting those targets?
Right.
Yeah, I kind of want to go to Tennessee now.
I haven't gotten a trophy since middle school.
We've got enough people coming to Tennessee.
That's a good problem to have. It's okay. One of the clinics that I was in, we tried really hard to recognize non-traditional therapy milestones. So for interns, it was the first time you did an intake, start to finish. Like it just felt like a really big thing. Or you got a paper accepted somewhere, or you spoke at a presentation. And so those we would give out Lego minifigure blind bags because you never knew what was in it. But then you'd see in people's offices, they'd have a couple up on a row. And it became a thing of like, I've got 5 minifigures, or people would trade them for different stuff. And it wasn't expensive on our end, but it was a really neat way of recognizing like, hey, you did a hard thing, or you've made another step in your journey, or someone got one once the first time a client made a complaint about them that was an unfounded complaint. And it happens sometimes, right? Like someone is upset, they want to vent, and that's the person they vent at. And it is not fun to be on the receiving end, but you handled it well. How do we move forward? And how do we learn a skill of how do we navigate that? And so that warranted a minifigure. We've also done traveling trophies as well, but ours have been a little bit different where, once I give you one at our staff meeting, Lucas, you hold it for 2 weeks until the next one, but then you're in charge of nominating and passing out the next one. So I think that one had been really meaningful because it was then peer given, and it kind of required people to look at each other and recognize what was going on within their team of, thank you for staffing this really hard case with me, or, I appreciate that you took a referral of mine of someone who needed to get in really fast and you gave up your lunch hour to see them, or whatever it might have been. And sometimes for me, it was really fun seeing people recognize each other for stuff I didn't even know about, like that they just solved a problem, they took care of it, they didn't necessarily need me for it. And those were like, the proud mama bear moments of like, oh, you guys got this. It was really cool.
That's cool. I think I had to become very intentional when it came to rewarding the team, because I think originally I had this mindset like doing great big things. So, once I started having those individual conversations, finding out that things that mattered to one didn't matter to the other. So one thing that I do, I guess you know how you have like love languages. So there was a similar assessment that I kind of like gave to everyone, and where one of my clinicians came to me and was like, I really like words of affirmation. So, I'm very intentional, like when she does something or says something, to praise, not only when it's just her and I, but even amongst the team too. So giving shout outs, spotlights, all those kinds of things. For some people, it's like little tokens. So I have another therapist who's like really big on Bath and Body Works. Like every wallflower, candle, you name it, she has it. Making sure to give like little, gift cards or things like that. And a bigger one, we try to do quarterly outings. So making sure to like get feedback from them, instead of me choosing, what do y'all want to do? Whether that be an escape room or bowling or whatever the case may be, giving them an opportunity to kind of choose and play into that as well. Something we do.
You bring up a really good point, and it was something that the clinician I was talking to earlier today talked a little bit about too. Was she was saying how in interviews or when she was onboarding a new clinician, what she typically does is ask how they like to be celebrated, because I think that you're right. Like some people, like the way that you might celebrate me would be horrifying to like someone else, like I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, but yeah, I think it is kind of like love languages in that way, and how tailoring it to them can make it feel like you're listening, and also just, I think that's great, Fabeain.
But I like the trophy idea too. I may take that.
It looks like we may have a fourth one coming. Which sounds like.
Might come visit.
I love it. Dynisha, do you have anything that you'd want to share?
I mean, I think the only thing I can add is this is an area that I feel like doesn't come natural to a lot of leaders, because we put our heads down and we just work and we don't do it necessarily for recognition. And so I think that's one thing that I've learned in the journey is like, just because I wouldn't like it or don't think it's warranted doesn't mean it doesn't need to happen. I think that can go across all things, but I'm really partial to team shouting out team. So the previous place I worked, which I have just stolen a lot of things from, they did rocks. And so it's like you rock, and it's just like a quarter page, and you put your name on it and who it's to and why you're shouting them out. And then those get read in the staff meeting from, to, why, and then you get it. And I have some of those from my previous position, like on my bulletin board at home. And I know other folks do too, because it's important. And so I like that, very similar to what was already shared of like team recognizing team.
And I like how, I think you raise an important point there relative to like reflecting on yourself and your need for recognition or your lack of need for recognition, which I think a lot of people can get caught up in. And what's important there is just paying attention to where people are at in their development. It's like you're a clinic director, you're fully licensed. You have so much more confidence and you're so much more settled into, yourself as a professional now. Whereas like when you're a younger emerging clinician, filled with uncertainty, crippled with a lot of doubt, those little things can be that much more significant. And so it's like when I'm hearing all of these great things you all do for your staff, I'm sitting here thinking like, Dr. Gersner's never given me a trophy. He doesn't take me on any outings. He doesn't even write me like nice notes. But that's okay, because he's the chief medical officer, and that'd be kind of absurd for him to give me a trophy. But that's just because I'm at a very different place, and so to be mindful of, where people are at, and especially if you're leading somebody who's in that phase of uncertainty and self-doubt, and you don't think that's necessarily warranted. It's like, I remember how powerful it felt when I was an emerging therapist and somebody I revered, like, bestowed confidence in me. Like that was powerful stuff.
Lucas, that's one of the biggest things that I get, especially if for the therapists that we've hired, like that are straight out of grad school, imposter syndrome. Like that's huge. Because, there's this fear that, I don't want to damage or hurt this client. But at the same token, am I capable? Well, of course you're capable. You've gotten a master's degree, you've done all this kind of stuff. So there's a part where it's also kind of like empowering and encouraging them, to trust themselves at the same token, because you didn't get this far by happenstance. So and some of that does come with experience, but to that point, giving them those little nudges, I think not only helps them in their career professionally but also personally too.
Okay, so last question that I wanted to ask you guys. So one of the points that Heather Younger had made was just about how empowerment and like empowering your clinicians and the people who work under you is not the same as delegation, and how that really struck me, because I think as a leader, I often think, oh, I'm empowering them to do this, and no, I'm actually just delegating. Like, that's not actually empowerment. And empowerment is actually helping them find self-actualization and find what they're passionate about, and then helping them kind of walk through that or achieve that. And so it's such a line where you don't want to be kind of giving your employees free rein, but you also don't want to be micromanaging. I'm curious how you guys are kind of walking that line or trying to empower your clinicians under you.
Well, I'll go. I think knowledge is very powerful. And so I don't gatekeep knowledge. And I don't think any of us probably do by any means. Every single thing that I have access to, they have access to. So they can do this job without me. And they can do it to the level that they want to do it. If they want to be up here excellent, they can do it. And so I think some of that is like to kind of wrap in what y'all had already said of really validating when things are challenging and yet you did it right. So I have clinicians who will come, okay, this is the situation. I think this is what you trained me to do. So I did this, 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 and this. And I'm sitting behind my desk. Yeah, that's it. You did it. That's so great. And then they're like, okay, what? I'm like, all right, bye. You could do it again, tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And anytime you can build efficacy in someone, I think that's empowering in and of itself. They had a tough session. They wanted to consult informally or formally. You validated what they did was an ethical, correct option. And like, here are 3 other things you probably could have did because, gray area and it depends and all that good stuff that we learn in our programs. And also, I think Ellie gives us a level of freedom as well that I don't feel like I even have an option to micromanage folks. Clinicians are in charge of their own schedule. Clinicians are in charge of their own Ellie match and what they get to say, what type of clients they want to work with, they feel comfortable, and then how they want to push themselves and challenge themselves to grow. I'm interested in this. So I think one of the best things that we've done is create a resource library. And so all clinicians could bring, from their program or from their own theoretical background, books, and put them in that bookshelf in the staff lounge. And you can take them and you can look at them. Or, hey, I'm interested in ACT, but I don't know a lot about it. Oh, guess what? This person was trained in ACT, and here are 4 books they put on the library. I'm having a hard time with a minor client. Okay, well, I bought a lot of books for kids and parents. So look at this one, look at this one, look at this one. And for them to develop their own sense of confidence and efficacy and knowledge. And that's, whether right or wrong, that's a lot of what I do.
And I love that. It's you could have just given them an overview on ACT. But when you do that, there is something implicitly disempowering. What you're doing instead is like, you're smart, you're interested in this. It's like, you can figure it out. It's like, oh, here's your resource. It's like, I'll make that easy for you. But yeah, it's like, dig in. I think that's great that you want to learn about this. I think those are like the little things that can have a pretty powerful benefit and impact.
So something that I started to do was kind of put myself in their shoes or explain to them times where, depending on the situation, how I might have struggled with that same thing. But then I also try to reiterate that, you have experiences and things that even some people who have been in the field for a long time don't. So in our team meetings, which they don't always like it, but I kind of have created a schedule where we kind of take turns teaching each other skills. even the clinicians that may not be, they're just associate level, because there is something that you have of value that, even more seasoned people can learn. So whether it's a new DBT skill or whatever the case may be, and then that's something that we also take and we use with our clients as well. So kind of giving them platforms amongst their colleagues to also express and show and do stuff, because I think experience can be a very good teacher.
I think for me, there's two parts to this question. The first part is meeting people where they're at developmentally. When you get graduate level interns in who, and they've been okay with me referring to them, this is because it's said with love, they're like the golden retriever puppies of the field. Like, they're just so excited and they want to be a part of everything and they have tons of energy, but you got to like hone in the direction a little bit.
Get them potty trained.
We haven't had that problem yet, but usually
metaphorically.
Yes, metaphorically, right? And so like where I meet them in their development is so different from when I have very seasoned professionals who come into my office and what they need. And I think what they have all in common universally is just like this desire for opportunities, right? And so as a leader, if I can create and identify opportunities for people based on what they've told me they're looking for. I had someone who, when I did one-on-ones, when I inherited a clinic, who told me, he's like, I took a supervision training. I want to be a supervisor. Someday I want to be a clinic director. And I said, awesome. And so in our leadership meeting, when somebody said, hey, we're looking for proctors for orientation, I immediately nominated his name because I said, this is a next step. This is the beginning of teaching. This is, you're going to have opportunities to show your skills in front of other leaders at Ellie. This is a great next step. And so being able to match people with those opportunities, and he's been so excited about it since. And so I think, as a leader, it's meeting people where they're at, and then what's the next opportunity? I don't ever want our clinicians to get bored or stagnant. I had someone once tell me they felt like a therapy factory, that every hour it was someone different, and you write the note and you just churn people out. And that's a dangerous spot to be in, that we should always find what is the next opportunity. How do I round out my skills? How do I take on something new? And I think it's about building a career and longevity in the field that nobody talked to me about until I was doing my own supervision training like a decade ago. And they were like, self of the therapist. And I was like, where's this been? And so we don't do a good enough job of planting that idea early enough to make it be a sustainable career.
Well, and even just like diversifying what you're doing as a therapist, I think is really important. And that is one of the things that I love about Ellie, is being able to diversify what I'm doing, do a lot of different things. I see clients, but then I'm also podcasting and working on a magazine, writing things. And I think that for clinicians that aren't at Ellie or are at Ellie, I think looking at how you can use your creativity, what you're passionate about, and kind of combine those interests. I think that keeps us from burning out, and it also helps us to, learn more about ourselves, be more effective therapists, and so I think that I have, in my own life at Ellie, I've felt very empowered by the people above me when I have an idea and I say oh, I'm really interested in this, and then I don't know, they don't go oh no, that's crazy. There was one day where I was like, why don't we have a magazine? Why don't we do that? And then they were like, great, do it. And so I just stuff like this where it's I think that it adds so much to the experience as a therapist. And I couldn't see clients all day, every day, and just nothing more. And I think that's why a lot of people become supervisors or go teach or write or do research, because I think that it's natural for us to feel like we should be doing different things.
And especially for young therapists who know nothing about the industry and are just coming out of a graduate program that narrowly prepared them to have a bare minimum knowledge required to start practicing therapy under the supervision of someone else. It's that's what they know. And, there's so much more to this industry and to this field. And the resource for them to discover all of that are their leaders, that they get connected with. And the earlier on in their career, somebody can open their mind and expand their mind, the better. Because when I met Miranda, you were a LGSW part-time.
I mean, that
out-
wasn't that long ago. But
I know
yeah.
it wasn't that, but now I don't even know what you are now.
I
but
started.
it's-
Well, I started at Ellie as a part-time therapist. I left child protection, started at Ellie as I think I was seeing like 8 clients a week because I was like, I want to be doing other creative things on the side. And then I started talking to Aaron and Hallie and some of the people in leadership, and they were like, why are you not doing this here? And so it is kind of, leaders have such a responsibility to see it in their clinicians, see the potential and see what their passions are and really try to encourage those. And yeah, now I'm podcasting in front of 1,500 people.
And killing it.
Oh, go ahead, Fabeain. Yeah.
I was saying, and killing it.
Oh, you're so kind. You can come on the podcast anytime you want. Okay, so we are running out of time. I'm wondering if you guys just want to have, if there's any last tips, last thoughts that any of you have for our listeners or the people in this room on the topic of leadership or anything.
I was pretty eager to talk about garbage leadership and complain, but like I'm just really impressed by this panel. And you kind of shifted my mood on it a little bit. And so what I would say about garbage leadership is things that fall short of what this group of people have just presented on. You know, that it's, if you're not getting anything of what was talked about today, you're not in a place that's going to support your growth, and you're not in an environment that's going to be sustainable. You know, and so find leaders out there who are actually passionate and sincere and invested in being a good leader.
And to piggyback off of that too, if you are a leader, a good leader that is in a situation or setting where it's hard to be that's okay. That you don't have to try to force yourself into that. You can go and find where your skill set can flourish in other settings too, because I think sometimes we internalize when something isn't going the way we want it to, like something is wrong with me, and that's not the case. You're just not the leader for that setting.
But on that note too, like how often are leaders just people who are burnt out? Like bad leaders are people who are burnt out or not filling their cup or not, like they aren't doing enough of their own work or their own self-care to really be able to pour into the people below them too.
It's also surprised me in this field how many providers I've worked with who have their own traumatic work experiences or have had bad leadership experiences. Because there's a part of me that, and maybe it's like the Pollyanna part of me that's like, we know better in this field. Like we should know how to build relationships and how to treat people. But it does happen. And I had one provider who, after she'd started working with me and we would do these regular routine one-on-ones, did them with everybody, she was so visibly anxious. And she's like, I gotta be honest, I was really anxious for this meeting because I had a bad supervisor previously and I didn't know if I should take Pepto or Imodium for the meeting. and like part of my heart broke for her, but I was like,
no, I get it.
yeah, I appreciate the sentiment, you know, but like, so we kind of joked. I was like, what if I just wore a t-shirt that said not, and I won't say the person's name, but like, I am not this person. And she laughed and thought it was funny, but you know, it was kind of that reminder. And it became an inside joke for a little bit when I'd send her an email of something that I needed her to do or, you know, missed a signature on something. Hey, this is Emily, not so-and-so. You know, just saw your notes for this week, and just to make sure this one gets billed, could you remember to change this code or whatever it was? And she took that feedback so much differently because the previous feedback she'd gotten, you know, anytime she would get feedback, it just brought up that same reaction of like, oh, I'm in trouble all the time, or I'm constantly doubting myself, or I just don't feel good about what's going on. And so I think being able to, I appreciate that she shared that with me, but having that recognition that we all have our own past leadership ghosts and our own experiences of what we think or hope or anticipate this might be like, or maybe what we don't want it to be like. And I think having that conversation with people and being able to just put it out there can be incredibly impactful.
I think someone told me that you'll know you're like a good leader, an effective leader, or they use some word like that, when a water cooler talk doesn't stop when you come up. And when your team feels comfortable complaining at you is when you know like you're doing something effectively. And that's a benchmark I try to hit. Is like, if you're in here complaining, okay, I'm doing my job. I'll take it.
But I think like I've always tried to approach it too from like a development aspect and a unique aspect. Like each staff member is unique. Their goals are unique. Their passions are unique. And so like developing them towards that also needs to be unique. And so really kind of, especially with the golden retriever therapists, like helping them fight that imposter syndrome. I did a supervision recently where the whole supervision was the staff member is an expert in a couple areas that I am not. And for an hour, I said, you tell me everything you know about this. And at the end, I was like, so what's your takeaway from this? Of course, she said, well, you didn't have anything prepared for supervision. But the reality was like, how do we develop them or uniquely, kind of creatively for that individual, get them moving in the direction that they want, and being on their team, so to speak. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining our panel and joining the podcast. And thank you all for listening. I guess we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks.
And good luck to all of our live attendees getting out of the parking ramp.
Yeah.
Please just be
1,500 of them.
patient with each other.
Yeah. There's a shuttle, right?
Yeah,
shuttle?
there will be a shuttle. Yeah, but don't stample over people. Get out of here.
Please
gotta beat 'em
form an
up with a
orderly line if you want Lucas's
And I'm sorry,
autograph.
but Miranda will not be signing autographs today.
Awesome.
were
Thank you
great.
guys so much.